Death, taxes, and Doc Rivers refusing to take accountability for his actions. Those do seem to be the only three certainties in life. Despite how far we seem to be from Doc Rivers, he continues to weasel his way back into the Sixers conversation. Most recently, he joined the Bill Simmons podcast after the Celtics won Game 3, where he had a discussion about why the Celtics are better on the road than they seem to be at home. And this conversation point was led by Bill Simmons in this particular context, but Doc had to throw a little jab right at Philadelphia. And to pull that up exactly here, he said, Doc Rivers thought it was a little bit difficult playing at home in Philadelphia. Quote, usually you play better at home. The only place that I thought it was difficult to play at home is in Philly because of the crowd. I thought it affected our players some. So for starters, just, Doc, keep the name out of your mouth, man. The excuses do not stop. I mean, since he has been fired from being the Sixers head coach, we've heard about how James Harden was different after he wasn't in the All-Star game. We've heard about the health reasons. We've heard about some of the drama in the locker room. We've heard about being too difficult to play at home. Maybe look yourself in the mirror and ask why that is the case. That the dude truly is a generational excuse maker. I cannot believe he continues to keep coming up with new ones. Now, the positive aspect of this that I will not overlook is Doc Rivers remains the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. And while Giannis will be healthier next year, while in theory Damian Lillard will be healthier next year, Doc Rivers is still going to be the head coach. And for that reason alone, I don't believe they can ever be championship contenders. I truly do feel at this point in time, we are at the stage in which basketball, modern basketball, has passed by Doc Rivers. That there was a point in time when this dude was a just fine, maybe even above average head coach. Those days are no longer. That you do not have the intricacies, the ability to adjust on the fly, the modernization of the basketball that we've seen progress at such a rapid rate. Doc Rivers is behind the times. And it is amazing to me for a guy who has been around as much basketball as he is, that so many of my critiques for him as a head coach are such basic stuff. Not knowing when to call timeouts, sticking to the all-bench lineups, not having a feel for the flow of the game or being able to adjust on the fly. That is basic stuff that a guy of his basketball IQ or who has been around the sport as long as he has should just know how to handle, and he straight up doesn't. Now, I am also thankful that he's the head coach of the Bucks for the aspect of we don't have to hear him on TV anymore, but I would appreciate if he would stop jumping onto these podcasts and floating up, talking about how great he is and how he's the best thing since sliced bread, because the act is getting quite old there. But thankfully, Doc Rivers is no longer a conversation point on this channel to a massive extent, that thankfully those days are behind us. Now, a player that I do want to talk about here could also have his days in Philadelphia potentially behind us, but I'm not as confident that is the case. That being Buddy Hield here. And the latest news that sparked on the timeline was a video of Buddy Hield working out with his trainer, Trey Slate. And what's notable about this video in particular is Buddy Hield is doing this in a Sixers uniform. Now, Buddy Hield was traded midseason. It is fair to assess he did not live up to the expectations that were hoped, and overall was an underwhelming experience in the half of a year he was in a Sixers uniform. Now, to Buddy's credit, he's been pretty open about his desire to come back. And to pull up the exact quote following Game 6, he said, quote, "I'm here now. I feel like we didn't get things done. I like to be in Philly again," Hill said this week after the Sixers dropped Game 6 against the Knicks. "They traded for me, and I feel like they would want me too." So I do hope that is the case. And obviously, money runs the world, and that number will likely dictate whether it will or whether it won't. But I would like to say that I am in favor of Buddy Hield returning to the Sixers team. Now, there's a lot to break into now. For starters, I want to address the trade specifically. We have that here. At the trade deadline, the Sixers getting Buddy Hield from the Pacers walking away with Furkan Korkmaz, who was waived, Doug McDermott, a 2024 second, a 2029 second, cash considerations. The Spurs walk away with Marcus Morris, who ultimately made his way to the Cavs for one impressive playoff performance, a 2029 second-round pick, and cash considerations. So essentially, the meat and potatoes of this is the Sixers gave up 3 second-round picks in exchange for Buddy Hield, which is a decent margin to get up, particularly in this time with the CBA. Second-round picks tend to becoming a little more advantageous and valuable due to the contractual situations you can get them in. Second-round picks are non-guaranteed. So, for example, with the Sixers with their 16th pick, there's a $4 million cap hit assigned to that. If they were to not pick in 16, trade out all the way to a second round, you can dictate what that dollar value is. It's most likely going to be a minimum. For example, Ricky Council on a $1.8 million contract this year. So more than half or less than half of that price point there. The point being there that is something that teams seem to be appealing a little more to. But the bottom line is this is about Buddy Hield. Now, I did see a report last week indicating that he might be willing to take as low as a veteran's minimum. That would be shocking to me. That I do think it should be noted that Buddy Hield is still a good basketball player. And to dive into what he brought on the table during his time with the Sixers, sure, it's a little bit underwhelming. 12.1 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.2 turnovers per game, shot 43.6% from the field and 38.6% from three, which are pretty poor shooting splits for him when you look at his career arc, which we're going to do in a second. But 91.8% of his threes assisted. That is notable there. 43.6% on cornered threes. Decent and pretty solid number. Very good number, to be perfectly honest there. Also, 66.8% of his shots being three-pointers. That he is a guy that's going to let it launch from deep. He's not as willing of a shooter as myself and I think all of us hoped. And that is the biggest thing that I think turned people off of his game a little bit. He's going to need the open three-pointers, but he's so efficient at it that I do think it's worth it. And to put yourself in Buddy Hield's shoes for a minute here, think about how difficult the situation to fit in was. That he got traded midseason. He got traded at the point in time in which Joel Embiid was injured. He then figured out his way, had a decent impact through the first 4 games, then had the All-Star break, wasn't as dynamic coming out of it, but still showing signs of it. Then Joel Embiid returns to the floor at the tail end of the regular season. The entire offense shifts where the Sixers have to refigure things out, and Buddy Hield's role changes dramatically. And he did not quite fit into that picture as well. The dribble handoffs between Buddy Hield and Joel Embiid never showed face. He was unable to fill that J.J. Redick type role, which was so dynamic next to Joel. That's still something I think he can get to if there is a full season where he can learn, where the playbook can be a little better catered to him. And to be fair to Buddy, I don't think Nick Nurse did a great job at creating shots for him this year. That I think he's so dynamic of a shooter that it is worth it to run sets to create three-point looks for him. And the Sixers did very little of that. To dive into his stats overall for Buddy, I did want to look at the bigger picture here. And it is those three-point numbers that are most noteworthy to me. Now, starters for his career, he's a 15.5 point per game scorer, also has 4.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and a 40% three-point shooter on 7.6 three-point attempts per game. That combination of efficiency and volume is really high-level stuff that you cannot replace that very easily. And we're talking about, like, flashing back just to a little bit earlier in the season. Like, if you want to look at his time with Indiana, we're talking about him shooting the cover off the ball. Or, like, in the 2023-2024 season, shot 42.5% on 8.5 three-point attempts per game. That is ridiculous stuff there. Now, with Buddy as well, that was the first time he'd ever been in the playoffs. That was a new experience for him. And by the way, don't let it get lost that in Game 6, he gave the Sixers a puncher's chance in that game. Poured in 20 points off the bench, knocked down 6 three-pointers, and that's when it should have clicked for some people of, okay, that is the reason we went out and got this guy. Now, I'm not going to pretend like it was better than it was during his experience in Philly. I will give him credit that he competed defensively more than I've seen him at any other location in his career, but that's not why he's here. He's here to shoot the ball. So with Buddy Hield specifically, it's obviously very price dependent. If this is a guy dead set on getting a bag this summer, I don't think it's going to be in Philly. There are far more valuable assets that the Sixers should be looking into. Guys like Paul George, LeBron James, Jimmy Butler. These big names are going to be the main focus, and Buddy Hield's going to have to be on the back burner for that. But if you liked what you felt from the playoff intensity, if you want to be a part of a winner, if you want to be on a team in a better situation than was ever the case thus far, that's speaking on the Sacramento Kings and the Indiana Pacers. In that regard, although the Pacers made a little bit of buzz this year, kind of disappointing that Buddy was not there for that I do think he was valuable to that team, and I'm kind of surprised they moved on from him in the first place there. But it obviously was for a little more defensive intensity, guys like Andrew Nembhard who shined, so a lot to go into it. But for the Sixers specifically, I do think this presents the opportunity to bring back Buddy Hield on a bit of a bargain contract. That if he had shot the cover off the ball, been incredibly productive, we're probably talking about a guy in like a $15 to $20 million range. That's not the reality. That we're talking about far cheaper than that. Maybe in that mid-level $8 million per year type range that we're talking for Buddy Hield. I'd be quite comfortable having him back. He's not perfect. He's not going to shine in every single game, but there's something there that will win this Sixers team a couple games. And I just think that floor spacing continues to be the most valuable factor when building around Joel Embiid. You have to have shooters to make teams think about doubling down on him, and that's what Buddy Hield will do. So I do believe with another season, maybe even potential couple other seasons, if you want to get a long-term deal, use that as a potential trade chip if the situation dictates. That's something that is appealing to me. So while the Buddy Hield experience has not lived up to our hopes so far, I do hope it's not done. I do think Buddy feels that way, and I hope the Sixers do as well. But let me know if you guys feel that way in the comments. Drop your thoughts on Buddy Hield. Would you be happy with him back in a Sixers uniform? I felt like I was in the minority on this, but got a lot of love on Twitter when I floated that out that I did want Buddy Hield back. So let me know what your guys' thoughts on it, because I do want to feel a little bit of the pulse of it. I'm very much for it and probably would be willing to pay a little bit more than most for it. I like Buddy Hield. I do think that he's better than he showed in a Sixers uniform thus far, and I would like him around for the long haul. So drop your comments below. Also, make sure you are smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel to keep this Sixers Digest family growing. Appreciate each and every one of you for tuning into this video here, and talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest.